Okay, so I believe we should now be live. So hello and welcome. I see I'm getting some chat on the Slack channel as well there. I'm just going to turn my... Okay, so hopefully you can see me. Hello and welcome to LiveCode Global. I'm Heather, as you may know, and I'm here with Elanor Buchanan, who's going to be kicking off the part 1 of the beginner's course, showing you how to create a simple to-do list. I'd like to welcome those of you that will be watching us on the replay as well, because I know quite a few people will be doing that. It's the middle of the night in some time zones. So if you have joined us here from Australia or the other side of the world, well done, welcome. Is there anybody here from Australia? I see somebody checking in from Korea, which is pretty noble. Let's see who else have we got. Fort Lauderdale, Miami. Anyway, feel free to type who you are and where you're from and what time it is in your time zone. While we're waiting, we'll just give people a few more minutes to join. So while we're waiting, I've set up in the I've set up a little button for you all in case you haven't managed to find the Slack channel, which we've set up as your hangout in association with this conference. You should now see in your chat a button that will allow you to join the Slack channel hangout as well, if you would like to. It's free, it's on all day, it's a place for you to hang out, talk to people, swap experiences. We'll drop in and out from time to time. Some of us obviously presenting, so we won't be there all the time, but that's there for you if you want it. So, just seeing how many people are with us now. Oh, yeah, we're getting there. 72 people live now, which is great. You're all getting up early for Eleanor's session. Germany, Sweden, New York, California, loads of people from all over. It's very exciting. So I am going to get down to business. I'm going to hand you over now to Elanor. And if you've been with us for a while, you might have worked with Elanor before. She's our go-to lady for excellent training courses. I'm not sure how many she's led now. Do you know how many you've done, Elanor?
No, a lot. Feels like a lot.
Anyway, I'm sure you're all going to enjoy this course, so I'm now going to hand you over to Elanor. You're up.
Hi everybody and welcome. So I recognise some of the names on here, so I don't actually think that everybody who's here is a beginner, but hopefully you'll still find something useful in it. So the way that we structured the beginner's course, because it's over such a sort of spread out amount of time over these 6 months, is that each day of the beginner's course we'll be doing a small but self-contained app as a way of learning some of the basics and creating some building blocks that you can hopefully use in your own app. So the first one is a very quick to-do list, and we'll take it from just starting up LiveCode to actually building a standalone at the end. So in the first section, we're going to be building the UI of the app. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. We've got 6 little sections for this lesson, and what I'll do is at the end of each section, we'll answer some questions. So just drop the questions in the chat if you have any.
The first step in our Creating To-Do List app is to create the UI, or the user interface. So we're going to start by starting up LiveCode. I'm using LiveCode Indy version 9. As long as you're using version 9, it doesn't matter what edition you're using, whether that's Community, Business, or Indy, like me. So here we have our LiveCode IDE, the menu bar at the top, the tools palette down the left-hand side. And we're going to start by creating our stack. So the stack in LiveCode is the window that we're going to create all our controls on. And in LiveCode, you go to File, New Stack, and here you're presented with some options. The default size, which is just a small square, and some standard iPhone sizes, iPhone 4, iPhone 5, iPhone 6. We're going to create a stack at iPhone 5 size. So you click on that, and here is your window that we're going to be using to create our to-do list. Now the first thing we want to do is we want to add some properties to our stack. So remember, the stack is the window, and the properties describe how it looks and how it behaves. So I could describe my properties as a person. I've got brown hair, I've got blue eyes. The stack also has a set of properties, and we can edit these using the property inspector. So we go to the object menu and we open up the stack inspector to see the stack properties. So we've got the name, the title, whether it's visible or not, so we can turn off visible, turn it on again. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set the name of our stack. So we're going to call this to do. You'll see it changes up there. And we're also going to set the title. So the name of our app is Do It. So you'll see here that if you've set a name, it displays at the top unless you've set a title. So the title is just a label. The name is actually the identifier for the stack. So now we've set those properties. This is a good point to save our stack for the first time. So we go to the File menu, we choose Save As. It'll automatically save with the name that we gave the stack, and we're just going to save it onto the desktop. And you'll see there is your todo.livecode file. So that's your LiveCode stack file saved. Now to start our to-do list, we're going to start by adding a header widget. So here on the Tools palette, you'll see we've got a lot of options. These are all the controls that you can use to build up the user interface of your app. So you'll see here we have what's called a header bar. And if you drag it out and drop it on your stack, you'll see it's a sort of standard mobile header bar. And what we can do is we can just drag that up and place it at the top of our stack. Now, just like the stack itself, every object that you add to your stack, so in this case we've added a header bar, has a set of properties associated with it. So here we've got the header bar selected, and you'll see that the property inspector, because I've still got it open, changes to show the properties of the header bar. If I had closed it, I could reopen it by going to the object menu and choosing the object inspector, and you'll see here is the properties for our header bar. Now, the first thing we're going to do is change the name. We're just going to call it header. You always want to give your objects short, descriptive names. This is because later on we'll be referring to these objects when we come to write our code. So we want them to be descriptive. This is our header. And we want it to be short so we don't have to be typing it out all the time. It's important that they are unique and descriptive so that when you come to write your code and when you come back to look at it again later, it's easy to see what you were doing. So now we're going to set up how our header bar looks. Now you'll see here there are some default header actions here. We've got a back and an add. Now at this point we don't actually need a back action because our to-do list is only going to have one screen. So we'll just delete that by clicking on the delete icon there, and you'll see we've now just got add. Now it's over on the left hand side here. That's not what we want. So we'll turn off first action on left, and it'll move over to the right hand side, which is the standard location on iOS. Because I'm doing this on a Mac, this looks like an iOS header bar. If you're working on Windows, it'll look more like an Android one. So the action, the standard actions, the position for those is up on the right hand side of the header. So we've got an add and an add, and we're just going to change the title here to tasks. So this is for our task list. So now we've got a title here and we've got an add action, and the add action will allow us to add new tasks to our list. So now we've got our header bar, we need a way to display the actual tasks that are in our list. So we're going to come back to our tools palette, and this time we're going to drag on a scrolling list field. So a list field, I'll just quickly show you, allows you to select an option and it automatically highlights the selected option for you. So that's perfect for our task list. So with your field selected, move it up under the header and drag it out and stretch it so that it fills the rest of the screen. Now again, we're going to set some properties. As before, I've still got my property inspector open, so it's automatically changed to show the properties for this list field. If you need to, you can reopen it from the object menu, choosing Object Inspector. Now again, we want to give this a short descriptive name, so we're going to call this tasks. And because we want our task list to start off empty, in our property inspector, we have different sets of properties. So these are just the basic properties. When we're setting up the header and the list so far, we've just used these basic properties. But you'll see if you hover over these that these are different sets of properties. We've got contents, we've got table properties, colors. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the contents pane and we're going to delete what's in here because we want our task list to start off empty. And that's it, our very simple task list. We're just going to have two controls on here at the moment. We will be updating these in later steps, but at the moment we've got a header bar which gives us a title, allows us to add an action, and we've got a list field here that we'll use to display our task list. So at this point, again, we're going to save our stack, and that's our UI, our user interface, complete.
Okay, so that is the first part of this to-do list lesson, which has created the UI. Does anybody have any questions at this point before we move on to adding some code to it? I don't see any questions in the chat, but if you do have any, just pop them in the chat and we'll address them. But if there's no questions at the moment, then we'll just move on to the second part.
So now that our UI is complete, the next stage is to add some code to our app to allow the user to interact with it. Now the way that LiveCode works is that it waits for the user to do something and then it tells your app what's happened, and it does that by sending a message. So when the user clicks on a button or types in a field, it will send a message to your app telling your app what has happened, and it allows your app to respond to the messages that it's interested in, and we add code to tell it what to do when those messages are received. So I'm going to close my property inspector to get that out of the way. Make sure you've got your header bar selected, and we're going to open up the script editor for it by going to the object menu and choosing Object Script. Now this here is our script editor, which is a small text editor that allows us to add code to the different objects on our stack. So you can see here we're looking at widget header, and this has a default mouse up handler in here. So the mouse up message is one of the messages that LiveCode sends when the user does something. So when you click, you get a mouse down. When you release, you get a mouse up. So we want to respond to that mouse up message. So basically we're saying when the user clicks, this is what we want to do. So our header bar here has some default code in here. So the most common thing you'll want to respond to in a header bar is a mouse up when one of the actions gets clicked on. So basically you want to respond when the user clicks on one of these actions. So there's a few things in here that we need to have a look at. We've got our on mouse up handler, so we're basically saying when mouse up happens, please do this code. So any code between on mouse up and end mouse up gets executed when the mouse up message is received. Now the first thing this does is declare a variable. So a variable is a container with a label on it that you can put some information into. So in this case we're creating a local variable, so that means it only lasts from here to here. The label that we're putting on it is action name, and we're going to put a bit of information in there that tells us which action was clicked on. So at the moment we've only got one action, but later we will have two. Now we do that by getting the mouse action property of me. So me is widget header. So what we're doing is we're getting the mouse action, so we're putting the mouse action, so the mouse action property tells you which action was under the mouse when it was clicked. So we put the mouse action of me into this variable labelled tActionName. So we're finding out which action was clicked, and we're storing that in this variable tActionName to use later. Now the next thing we're doing is we're doing a check. So we're using an if, which is a conditional. So that just allows you to check the conditions of a particular event. So we're saying if this is the case or if this is the case, and we can do different things depending on those conditions. So the default is to check if action name is empty. So in a header bar, if you click here, the action name would be empty. If you click here, the action name would be empty. If you click here, the action name would be add. Because if we open up the property inspector quickly and have a look, one of our action names is add, and so if you click over that action, the value in this tActionName variable would be add, but anywhere else it would be empty. Now we don't actually want to check if it's empty, we want to check if it is actually add. So we change that to say if tActionName is add, then do whatever is in here. So whatever code we put in here will be executed if we click on this add action. So when we click on the add action, the first thing we want to do is ask the user to type in the new task. So we do just ask them, we just say ask, please enter a new task. And what this will do is this will show a little window to the user with a field for them to type into, so they can type in their new task. Then we want to check that they haven't clicked on cancel, so they have a cancel option on there. So we say if the result is not cancel, we're saying if they don't cancel it, then do whatever is in here. If they do cancel it, that's fine, we just won't do anything else. So if the result is not cancel, then what we want to do is we want to add this new task that they've entered, and we want to put that into the task list. Now at the moment our task list is empty, but we might have some tasks in there at some point, so we don't just want to replace whatever's in there, we actually want to append the task, so to put it on the end of the list. So there are actually two cases. There's one case where the list is already empty, and there's another case where the list already has some tasks in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if field tasks is empty, then we're going to do one thing, else, which means otherwise, we're going to do something slightly different. So we're saying if field tasks is empty, then what we want to do is we want to put it into field tasks. Otherwise, what we want to do is we want to create a new line, so we want to do a return character and then put the new task after that. So if there's already 3 tasks in there, we'll create a new line by doing a return character, just like in a word processor, and then we'll put the new task after that return character. So if field tasks is not empty, so now we're here in the else, we're going to put return, so just a return character, ampersand. So ampersand is called string concatenation, and that just means that it glues 2 bits of text together. So return is a bit of text, and then it is a bit of text. We're going to put that after field tasks. And then we're going to apply this script. Now you'll see here that if I make a change, this indicator here goes yellow, and that means that we've got unsaved changes. If I click apply and it goes green, that means there aren't any errors in my code. Now that doesn't mean that the code will definitely do exactly what you mean, it just means that there aren't any syntax errors, there's no sort of grammatical mistakes if you like. If I did have a syntax error, for example here, I haven't closed this quote, if I click on apply it'll go red and it'll highlight the line with the error on it, and it'll give me some information. So it says missing quote after literal. So I can go here, I can put that back in, I can apply, and it goes green. Now let's just go quickly over what we've done here. So we've checked to see what action was selected, we've checked to see if the selected action was add, we've asked the user to enter a new task, we've checked that they didn't cancel, we've then looked at field tasks, and if that field is completely empty, we're just putting it. So it is the value that's returned from this ask dialog. We're just putting that into the field. If the field is not empty, then we're creating a new line by putting in a return character, and then we're putting the new task, and we're putting that after field task, so we're appending to the list. Now we've done that, we're ready to test adding a new task. So up until this moment we have been editing our stack. We've been adding controls and adding codes. We've been editing it. Now what we want to do is we want to actually be able to test it. So LiveCode has two modes. So up until now we've been in edit mode, which allows us to select and edit objects and add code and things like that. What we're going to do now is we're going to change into run mode. So it's going to run and we can interact with it as if we were a user using it on our phone or a desktop app. So all we do is we click onto the run tool here in the tools palette, and that switches us into run mode. And now you'll be able to see that if we click on our add button, then it asks us to enter a new task. So perhaps we need to buy some milk. We click OK, and it gets put into our task list. If we add another one, walk dog, but then actually we remember that we asked somebody to walk the dog for us, so we can cancel it. Nothing happens, it doesn't change the list. And now if we add another task, maybe we need to collect dry cleaning. Now this time there's already a task in our list, so we hope that it goes onto a new line here. So we click OK, and it creates a new line for this task. So now we have two tasks, buy milk and collect dry cleaning.
Of our lesson. Now we got a couple of questions in the chat there. One of them was from Tyrone, and he was asking whether you can change the icons in the headers. So we're actually going to use this in the next part when we add a second action to our header, but I'll just very quickly show you how easy it is to change the icons in the header. So if I just quickly make a new stack and drag on header. I'll just make this a bit bigger because I'm not sure how clear this is on the screen. Then when you open up the property inspector, you've got your standard header actions here, and here are the icons that are shown for them. Now if you want to change the icon, you just click on the icon that's there, then you see the current icon, and then you can choose from these built-in icons and it'll change on your header bar. Now the reason there are two icons here is you've got your icon and then you've got your highlighted icon. So if you wanted a different icon for the highlighted state of the icon, then you can choose two icons here, one for the normal state and one for the highlighted state. But by default, the normal icon and the highlighted icon are usually the same icon, they're just shown in a different color. And we will actually be using this in the next section. The other question that we had was about declaring variables. And if you're looking at the chat, you'll see there's a couple of sort of opposing views there. So we do it in the office. Our team, part of our coding standards is that you declare variables. And this is for a number of reasons. It can help you if you make typos in your variable name, so it helps with error checking. It helps you make sure that you've initialized variables. So if you expect something to be 0 and actually it's empty, then your code doesn't always work. So it helps you ensure that all variables are initialized. Mark pointed out that it can help when you're coding as part of a team because spellings are different. So even the difference between British and American English and how we spell color, for example. So it can help pick up on things like that. And also for some languages are much stricter with their variable declarations, and LiveCode Builder, for example, is stricter. So it's just a good habit to get into, but it's not required in LiveCode. You don't have to declare your variables in LiveCode. Okay, so let's just quickly see if there's any other questions here. I'm going to stop screen sharing because we get this inception. But let's see if we've got any other questions. Mark's been answering some questions as well. So Tyrone's asked if we're limited to the built-in icons. So at the moment, you are limited to the built-in icons, but that is a feature that's already in our bug database as a request to help people, to allow people to use their own custom icons. So at the moment, you have to choose from the set of icons that we have there, but that will be fixed in the future to allow for custom icons. Tom's asked if this is a mobile app, does it matter that we're using mouse up instead of tap, or in LiveCode we have touch end? So for something like clicking on a button, it doesn't matter. The mouse up message will map to a touch start message. If you're developing specifically for mobile, then you can use the touch messages, particularly if you want to use multi-touch messages. So if you want to do a pinch or a zoom or something like that. But if you are developing something that you might want to use on desktop and on mobile, then as long as you're not using any gestures, as long as you're just using sort of single touch messages, then you can just use mouse up and it'll map directly. Have we got any other questions in here? I think that's it for the moment. There's some conversation generally going on. Oh yes, and Heather just pointed out that my camera's off. Sorry, I'll turn that on next time. I think we're just about to start the next part of the tutorial anyway. But Mark's also pointed out that there is an SVG icon widget that allows you to specify a custom SVG path, and that's true. So you can create your own custom SVG icons using the SVG icon widget, but at the moment, if you're using a header bar or a navigation bar, then you're limited to the built-in ones, but you can use the SVG icon widget to create your own custom SVG icons as well. I think that's all of our questions for now. If we've missed anything, we'll come back to them after the next section, but we'll move on to the next section now.
Okay, so now we can add tasks to our list, but when we've bought milk or we've collected our dry cleaning, we also want to be able to remove these tasks from our list. So we're going to add another action here, which will allow us to delete tasks. So because we want to start making changes again, we're going to switch back to edit mode. So in the tools palette, move into edit mode, and now when we click on our header bar, it gets selected and we can make some changes to it. So we want to add another action, so we're going to use the property inspector to do this again. I'm going to close my script editor just to get it out of the way, make sure we've got the header selected, and open up the property inspector for the header by going to the object menu and choosing object inspector. Now what we want to do is we want to add another header action here. So to add another action after add, we can just click the add button next to the action, and you'll see there's the tooltip says add item. So our new item is going to be delete, so we put delete there, and we want to choose an icon for it. Now we didn't have to do this last time because the default icon was add or plus, which is the one we wanted. But if we want to select a different icon, what we do is we just click on the icon here, and we're presented with a pop-up that allows us to choose from a set of built-in icons. Now it's scrollable. You can see there's lots of icons in here, and what we're going to use for delete is that there is somewhere there's a trash icon. So when I select that, you'll see we now have a nice delete icon here. The other thing we need to check is the action names property here. So now it's add a new item, and we need this to be add and delete. Now this is the actual value that's returned when we get the mouse action. So we need to make sure we update that, otherwise when we click on this action we'll get new item as the name of the mouse action. Okay, so now we've added our delete icon. We need to add code to respond when they click on the delete action instead of the add action. So I'm going to close the property inspector. I've still got my header selected, and I'm going to reopen the object script for the header bar. Now here we've checked to see if action name is add, then we do all this. Now we have another option here. So it's an else, so it's otherwise. But what we can do is we can say otherwise if t action name is delete, then do whatever comes after this bit of code. So all this happens if the action name is add, whatever we put in here happens if the action name is delete, and if the action name is empty, if we've clicked somewhere else, then nothing will happen, which is exactly what we want. Now the way the delete will work is it will delete whichever item is currently selected in the list. So at the moment we've got collect dry cleaning selected, so it would delete that item. Now we don't want to delete things by accident, so the first thing we want to do when we're deleting, and this is generally true when you're deleting things, is just to confirm that deletion with the user. So this time we use an answer, so we're asking a question, so we're answer, are you sure you want to delete this task? And then we can tell it what options we want. So we answer with yes and no. So what this will do is this will pop up a dialog to the user saying, are you sure you want to delete this task? And it will have two buttons, yes and no. And then what we can do is we can add some code to do a different thing depending on what option they choose. So if it is yes, then we want to do whatever we put in here. So again, we're using an if, a conditional. So if it is yes, then we want to delete it. Otherwise, if it's no, we don't want to do anything. So if it's yes, what we want to do is we want to find out which line is highlighted and then delete that line from the task list. So at the moment, line 2 is highlighted. So if we click on delete and then say yes, it would delete this line. So to find out which line is highlighted, we'll create a new variable, t line number, and this will store the line number of the highlighted line. And then what we do is we put the highlighted line of field tasks into t line number. So at the moment that would put 2 into our t line number variable. And then what we want to do is we want to delete line t line number of field tasks. So what we're saying is put the highlighted line into t line number, so that's 2, and then delete line 2 of field tasks, which will delete this line here. Now we want to apply that script, make sure there aren't any errors, and to test it, as before, we come back to run mode, we make sure our line is selected in our task list, we click on delete, we say yes, we want to delete, and it will delete that line. Now if we don't want to delete it, we say no, and nothing happens. So now we can add tasks and we can delete tasks when they're finished. And at this point, remember to save your stack.
Okay, and that is the end of that part. So all we did there was we added a second action to our header, and in that one we used what we talked about before, where we actually chose a different icon for the delete icon, and then we went in and we used our if statement to do one thing if we're doing an add, and another thing if we are doing a delete. Now I don't see any new questions. So again, we'll just move on to the next section, but if you do have any questions, just pop them into the chat and we will deal with them after this section. Okay, so do have a question here from Willie about undo. So in LiveCode at the moment, we don't have a reliable multiple undo feature. Some things you can undo and it will work. So for example, if you're changing your script, up until the point where you can undo changes to script. Sometimes if you have, for example, deleted a control, you can delete, if you delete a control and you realize that you didn't want to, you can undo that. So usually we have you can usually undo the last thing that you did. Multiple undo is a feature that has been requested a lot and that we do want to add. And it is something that we know is near the top of our list to really improve the usability of LiveCode having multiple undo. So that is something that we are aware of. Oh, sorry, Willie's just clarified that he means undoing the deletion of the task. So If we wanted to do that within our app, we'd have to add some code to do that. And that's not a sort of built-in feature of your actual app itself. What I was talking about before was actually using the LiveCode IDE and having an undo feature in the IDE. If you want undo features in your app, you would have to implement that yourself. So what you could do is you could store the last version of, you could store different versions of the task list, perhaps in custom properties. So every time somebody adds or deletes a task, you could store it before you make the change, and then make the change. And if they need to undo, you can handle the key messages. So for example, if you wanted it to be Control Z on desktop to undo, you could handle that message, and you could go back to a previous version of the task list itself, but you would have to do that all in code yourself. And then Albert has asked, T-line number is a local variable. Can we miss of field tasks? So where we did delete line 2 or line T-line number of field tasks, you have to, because the code is not in the task field, you need to tell it what object you're referring to, because that code is actually in the header bar code and not in the task list code. You do have to say that you want to delete line 2 of field tasks, because if you just said delete line 2, it doesn't know what control you're actually referring to there. So you would always have to refer to the field tasks. So although it's a local variable, the script is in the header bar and not in the task list. So we have to actually explicitly say it's line 2 of field tasks. And the same way if you had multiple fields on your stack, on your card, you'd always have to say which line 2 you wanted to delete. So it's in that case you have to say of field tasks. If you were in the code of the field itself, you could use of me, because it would know that me was the task list, but you definitely have to say line 2 of field tasks. Let's see, I don't think we have any other questions at the moment before we move on, but if you do, just like I say, just drop them in the chat and we'll deal with them. So time to move on to part 4.
So now we can add and delete tasks. The next thing we want to do is we want to be able to save our task list. Now we need to do this because once you build your app into a self-contained or standalone application that you can share with other people, once it's been built into a standalone, you can't make any changes to it. Even the code itself can't make changes to the app once it's built. So anything that we want to persist, anything we want to save in between uses of the app, for example here we want to save our task list, we don't want to come back tomorrow and all our tasks to be gone. What we need to do is we need to save that information outside of the app itself. So I'm going to close the script editor for the widget here, and what we're going to do is we're going to add some code to our stack script. So go to the object menu and open up the stack script, and this is where we're going to add some code to save our task list and to load it back in the next time you open the app. So the first thing we'll do is we'll save out our task list, and what we want to do is we want to save the task list whenever the app is closed. So what we'll do is we'll use the message on close stack. So just like mouse up, which is automatically sent when the user clicks on something, the close stack message is sent when the stack is closed. So we can do any saving, any cleanup in here. And what we're going to do is we're going to save our task list out to a text file in our documents folder. Now the reason we use the documents folder is that all platforms have a documents folder that you can write to. Whether you're on Mac, Windows, Linux, iOS or Android, the documents folder is always a writable location. So that's a good one to use for any app data that you might have. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a local variable, and we're going to call it tfilepath, and we'll use this to store the path to the file where we want to save our data. And what we're going to do is we're going to put special folder path. So the special folder path is a function in LiveCode. So this is a built-in function, and it will give you the full path to some of the standard folders. and we want the path to the documents folder. Then we need to create a file called doit_tasks in there. So we need to put a slash. This will give us the path to the folder. So for example, it would be /users/Elanor/documents. And then we need to do a slash to create a file. And we're going to call it doit_tasks. And we're just going to create a text file because we're just going to be storing text in here. So put special folder path documents, which is the path to the documents folder, and then doit_tasks.txt, which is the actual name of the file. We're going to put that into t file path. And then all we need to do to save what's in this field here out to file is we just put the text, so the contents of field tasks, into URL, so that's telling it to use a file URL, and it's file, and then ampersand to glue the text together, and then t file path. So what this will do is this will construct this path, so documents folder, and then a text file called doit_tasks.txt, and then we put the text of this field, so the text of this field is just whatever is contained in our tasks field. And we put it into this URL, so the URL is just an address. It's a file, and this is the full path to it. And we'll apply that. Now that's our close stack, which will save out our task list. Now we also want to be able to load that back in the next time we start up the app. So again, we'll be using a built-in message. I'm going to put it at the top here, just because you usually open something before you close it. And we're going to use the pre-open stack message. So this is the close stack message, and this is the pre-open stack message. So this message is sent when the stack is opened, but before the user sees anything. And what we're going to do here is just the inverse of what we did in close stack. Again, we'll have local t file path, and it'll be exactly the same path. So I'm just going to copy this. So again, we've got the file path, the path to the file here, but this time, instead of putting the text of field tasks into the URL, we're going to set the text of field tasks to whatever is in that URL. So here we put the text into the file, and here we're setting the text to whatever is in the file. So this will save, and this will load in and display in our field here. So again, we'll just quickly save our stack. And then to test it, what we'll do is we'll actually close the stack, so we'll actually quit LiveCode. And then we can come to the documents folder. So if I go to my documents folder, you'll see here that there's a doit_tasks.txt file. I can open that up, and there's my task, buy milk. And if I start up LiveCode again, and reopen the list, then there's my buy milk task. Now we just did that in the IDE, but later we'll be building a standalone, and you'll see that that also works in a standalone application.
Okay, hi everybody, welcome back. So yes, that is how you would save out and reload any information that you need to persist between uses of your app. So it might be something like a to-do list, it might be a high score for a game, anything, any data that you want to save. You can't save it into the app itself once it's built into a standalone, so you would always have to use a system like this to write it out. Now we just wrote out to a text file, but you could use a database or anything else that, whatever type of data you need. It's just that we had text data, so we created a text file. So we've got a couple of questions here. So one from Willie, he was asking about the special folder path function, whether it's language independent, because in Dutch the folder is called, terrible Dutch pronunciation, I'm sorry, but documenten rather than documents. So you would have to use the English version of documents when you're using the special folder path function. So you would have to say put special folder path documents, but the path to the file that's actually returned it'll come from your system. So if your system is set to be Dutch or Swedish or whatever language, it'll return the path to that folder on your system. So if your system is Dutch, it would return whatever the equivalent is on your Dutch system. So it is language independent in that sense, in that it is just the path to the folder on your particular system, and it's also cross-platform. So if you're on Mac, it'll return you the Mac platform. If you're on Windows, it'll return you the Windows platform, etc. And then he asked why set versus put. So these are just, so you use set for properties. So the text of a field is a property. So for example, the visible is a Boolean property. So you would set the visible to true or set the visible to false. The text is a property. So I set the text of the field to the contents of that URL. You could also put whatever is in that URL into the field. That's two ways to do it. It's just use put for properties. Use set for properties. So it's always get and set for properties. And in this case, I chose to use the text property. We've got a couple of other questions here. So there's one from George. Suppose you run and open the stack, but there's no previous task list.txt. Do you put a question to see if it's there the first time? So in this particular case, you don't have to do that. If you put something into a text file and it doesn't exist, then LiveCode will create the text file. So when we added our first task, which I think was buy milk, when we added our first buy milk task, because the doit tasks.txt file didn't exist, LiveCode automatically created it. So that's fine. It will create a text file if you need it. What it won't do is it won't necessarily create all the folders in the path to the file. So we just put our file directly in the documents folder. So the documents folder is always there, so you don't have to think about that too much. But if we had wanted to create a folder inside our documents folder, for example, if we'd wanted it to go into a folder called doit, and then inside that text file called tasks.txt, we would have had to explicitly make sure that that folder existed. So you don't have to check for the existence of a file, but you might have to check that the full path, all the folders to get to that file do exist. So yeah, you have to make sure about folders. It's good practice if you're going to create files just to make sure that the path to the file exists before you actually try and put something in. That's actually good practice to do. We could have done that in here, and we just make sure that the folder that you're trying to create a file in exists before you try and create the file. Albert has asked why pre-OpenStack and not OpenStack. So when the stack is opened, when the app is opened, you get a pre-OpenStack message, and then you get an OpenStack message. Now the main difference between these is that anything you do in pre-OpenStack happens before the app is made visible to the user, and anything that happens in OpenStack happens after the app has been made visible to the user. So we did it in pre-OpenStack so that we could put our saved tasks into the task list and then show the app to the user, and the tasks are already there. If we'd put it in pre-OpenStack, what would have happened is that the stack would have opened up and it would have shown either an empty task list, or if there had been tasks in there when we'd saved it, they would show first, and then you'd have a split second, and then the task list would be updated. So the user would see a sort of like a flash, and they'd see that change. So it's just a nicer user experience. It's just a bit cleaner if you do these updates in pre-OpenStack before the stack is actually made visible. Will the URLs for the videos and or a PDF of the step-by-step instructions be available? I'm sure that they will be. I think Heather is probably the best person to tell you where they'll be available, but they certainly will be available. Dawn has asked, does LiveCode support other data formats like JSON, CSV, etc. for file data? And yes, it does. So you can read in JSON. We've got some functions in LiveCode so that will allow you to convert JSON to a LiveCode array and a LiveCode array to JSON. And CSV, CSV is really just text data. So that's fine too. So yes, for text files, you can have JSON data, you can have CSV data. You can also create binary file data. So you can create images, things like that. You can also use binary file data. So where in my example I used file : and then the path to the text file, you can use bin file : and then the path to binary file, which is what you'd use for an image or a sound or another type of binary data. And yes, for JSON, have a look at the JSON to array and array to JSON functions. And for CSV, that's just comma separated values, so you can read that in and then you can split it up using commas, doing some text processing there. Let's see what other questions we've got here. Also, Terry's pointed out that on Mac, on Dutch systems, all the standard folders are accessible with both the Dutch and English names. So that's good to know. Oh yes, Albert said that for JSON data, have a look at the BMI app. So the BMI app is one of our interactive tutorials that you can have a look at inside the IDE, and it actually uses JSON data. So you can have a look at that if you want to see how to process JSON in LiveCode. And Heather has replied to Mark saying, yes, everything is being recorded and you'll get the replay link later today. So everything that we are talking about just now, the videos, there's also slides to go along with this, and you'll get links to that later on today. Okay, so I'm going to start. Oh, another question. Yes, Jonathan's said that we've also got array encode and bin file for saving multiple data points. So if you've stored your data in an array, so in a more structured way than just a text file, if you've got it stored as an array, you can encode that as an array using the array encode function, and then you can save it out to a binary file. When you want to read it in, you do array decode. Well, sorry, you get the data from the binary file, you do array decode to turn it back into a LiveCode array, and then you can carry on using it in your app. So we're running out of time a little bit here, so I'm just going to quickly start the next section. So that the next section is building a standalone. So we'll do that now, but please, yeah, keep asking your questions in the chat, and hopefully we'll be able to address most of them before we finish.
Okay, so now we're happy with our app. It does everything that we want it to. We've tested it and made sure that it works. We're ready to build it into self-contained app. In LiveCode, we call these standalones. And once it's built into a standalone, you can share it with people who don't have LiveCode. So it's really easy to build a standalone. The first thing we do is we set up the platforms that we want to build for. So we choose standalone application settings from the file menu. You'll see that the standalone name is Todo. That's the same as the name of our stack. You can change it if you want to, but I'm just going to leave that there. Now, one thing we do need to do is, because we've used a widget here, so we've used our header bar widget, we need to make sure that that gets included in our standalone. So we're going to check the option to select inclusions for the standalone application. And now we're going to go to the inclusions pane, and we're just going to check the header bar to make sure that that gets included. Now, the next thing we can do is we can check all the platforms that we want to build for. So we've got Mac, Windows, and Linux as default, so those all come out of the box. All the platforms can build standalones for all the other platforms. Now, we could also build for iOS and Android. I'm already set up for iOS and Android deployment, but if you haven't done it so far, you need to install some additional supporting software for those two platforms. We have some lessons on that, and I'll link to those in the slides to go with this lesson. But for now, we'll just do the desktop platforms. So we've checked the 3 desktop platforms. To save it, we just go to File, Save a Standalone Application, choose where we want to save it. And now we have a folder on our desktop. In there, we've got the 3 desktop platforms. You'll see that on Windows, we have an exe. On Linux, we have an executable. And on Mac, we've got an app bundle. So I'm just going to quit LiveCode so that we can see that we're using the standalone. open it up. And because we're using the same system, so it's looking in the same documents folder, there's my buy milk task. And I can add another task. Delete the buy milk task. Close down this. And if I start it up again, I should just have that walk dog task there. So you can see that any changes we make to our to-do list do persist in between uses of the app. Now, just to quickly show you as well what you can do with, for example, iOS, I will show you this on the iOS simulator. Now, like I said, I already have this, I already have iOS development set up, but once you have yours set up, you'll be able to do the same. So to test on the iOS simulator, I'm just going to untick the others just to speed it up a bit. Then go to the iOS pane, check the iOS option. There's my display name. And then because I've got Xcode and everything already installed, I can go to my development menu, choose the test target. So I'm going to choose the iPhone simulator. So now if I just choose test, it should show up on the iOS simulator here. And we can add a task here. And if I close it down and then open it up again, you'll see that my task is still there on the simulator. Now the reason it doesn't look great here is because I had to shrink this down to 50% because it doesn't quite fit on my small screen here. But we can also delete tasks. And you'll see here that when we add or delete a task, these show up as nice native iOS dialogues. You see that the scroll bar here doesn't look great. That's just because we haven't used a native iOS scroller here. That's something we'll be looking at later in the beginner's course. But hopefully you can see that we can make a very simple app that will work on all platforms, save out the information in between, and it will work cross-platform on all the desktop platforms and on the mobile platforms without having to make any changes.
Okay, everybody, so that was the end of part 5 where we built a standalone. So there is a part 6, but all we do there, and I'm just going to briefly describe it to you because we're just about to run out of time. So part 6 just talks a little bit about how you can customize your app a little. So the app that we made there is very, very basic app, but you can, in very simple ways, you can customize it and make it a bit more unique. You can change fonts, you can change text sizes, you can change the icon colors, you can change text colors and highlight colors, all sorts of things like that, where all you're doing is changing properties. So you're not doing anything particularly complex. You're not bringing in any images or anything like that, but you can customize your app quite a bit just by using the stack and object properties. So have a look in the property inspector, have an explore, see what you can change, see how to change how it looks, and if you want to, we would love to see what you make. So just very quickly before we run out of time, because we're at the end, but there's a couple of questions here. So Ricardo's asked if you can create apps for Apple Watch. Now, I'm not actually sure about that one. I'm not sure that you can at the moment, but that's something that I can check into. Maybe if you want to pop a question on the Slack channel, we can get back to you there. Scott's asked, often when I launch the simulator for the first time in a session, it takes a long time. Is this normal? And that is normal. It just takes a while to start up. So the first time you click the test button, if your simulator isn't actually already running, it has to start up the whole sort of simulator app, and that can take a long time. Once it's open, it should be a bit faster once you're making changes. Can you show where the text files are on the Mac? So the one that we created there would just be in your documents folder. So you can open up your documents folder and that text file would just be in there. So in mine, it's users/Elanor/documents. So it's just your standard documents folder. So yes, thank you very much. Thank you for attending the lesson. If you have any questions about it afterwards, do put them on the Slack channel and we'll pick them up from there. And we'll see you in a month for the second app in the beginner's course. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much, Eleanor. That was great. I'm just going to end this session, and if you can all go and look at your email for the link to join the next session, because this one has to end before I can start the next one. So you will find a link in your email, go and join, and we'll be next up with the Flash Talks. See you in a few minutes.